I'm Morgan Thompson, 32 years old, standing in the corner of my parents' ballroom, champagne trembling in my hand. My brother Jason's engagement party sparkles around me, crystal chandeliers, designer dresses, perfect smiles. Just like childhood, I'm invisible in his shadow. Then my father taps his glass, announces a surprise gift, $1.3 million for Jason and his fiancée. His next words slice through me. If only you weren't such a failure, Morgan. My heart shatters like crystal, but across the room, Grandma Rose's eyes lock with mine. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like button while I gather the courage to share how my grandmother changed everything that night. Growing up in our sprawling Connecticut estate, I learned early that being a Thompson meant expectations. Sky-high, non-negotiable expectations. My parents, Victoria and Edward Thompson, built their real estate empire from a small inheritance, transforming it into Thompson Luxury Properties, the premier development company for elite homes along the eastern seaboard. Our family's success story was legendary in business circles, but inside our perfectly decorated home, success had a very narrow definition. Thompsons excel at everything they touch, my father would say during our formal Sunday dinners, his eyes inevitably sliding to Jason, 2 years my junior, who seemed born knowing how to make our parents proud. Jason could do no wrong. By age 6, he was winning swim meets. By 10, he was the math prodigy teachers raved about. By 14, he was captain of 3 sports teams and straight-A student destined for Harvard. His bedroom walls disappeared beneath trophies and medals, each one meticulously dusted by our housekeeper under Mother's watchful eye. Your brother understands what it means to be exceptional, Mother would tell me, her voice containing that particular blend of disappointment and resignation I became all too familiar with. It wasn't that I was a bad student or troublemaker. I was simply different. While Jason calculated figures and dominated athletic fields, I disappeared into art.
Colors spoke to me.
Textures and compositions filled my dreams. I'd spend hours in our garden sketching flowers or in my room blending paints, creating worlds that made sense to me in ways our real life never did. When I was 12, my art teacher entered one of my paintings in a regional youth competition. Against all odds, I won first place. The local newspaper even printed a small picture of my work, a watercolor of 2 hands reaching toward each other, almost touching. I never felt so proud. That same weekend, Jason hit the winning home run at his baseball championship. My parents threw an elaborate party for him, inviting all their friends and business associates. My art competition certificate sat unmentioned on the kitchen counter until our housekeeper finally placed it on my desk days later. I saw your little drawing in the paper, Mother said when I finally gathered the courage to mention it. It's nice you have a hobby to keep you occupied. A hobby? That's all it ever was to them. The only person who truly saw me was Grandma Rose, my father's mother. She lived in a modest house about 30 minutes away, refusing my parents' offers to move her into a luxury condo or our guest house. Too much marble makes my feet cold, she'd say with a wink when they'd bring it up at family gatherings. Grandma Rose had been a teacher before retiring, English literature at a public high school. In her small, book-filled home, success wasn't measured by bank accounts or social connections. Rose valued authenticity, kindness, and the courage to be oneself. Your art speaks truth, Morgan, she told me after I showed her my winning painting. Never underestimate how rare and valuable that is. When I'd visit her, usually escaping after one of Mother's lectures about applying myself properly, Grandma Rose would make hot chocolate no matter the season and listen, really listen, as I talked about colors and light and the stories I wanted to tell through my art. The world needs beauty as much as it needs business, she'd remind me. Perhaps more so. By 16, exhausted from the constant current of disapproval at home, I began trying to reshape myself into someone my parents might approve of. I joined the debate team because public speaking was a valuable skill for business. I took AP Economics, though it made my brain hurt. I dated Bradley Hutchins, the son of one of my father's business partners, though his conversations about golf and investment portfolios bored me to tears. The ultimate betrayal of myself came senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to Rhode Island School of Design with a partial scholarship, a dream come true. But after weeks of my parents' subtle and not-so-subtle commentary, artists starve, Morgan. We didn't provide you every advantage to waste it on finger painting. I declined RSD and accepted admission to NYU's Stern School of Business. Finally making sensible choices, my father said, the closest thing to approval I'd ever received. Jason, of course, went to Harvard, graduated summa cum laude, and immediately took a vice president position at Thompson Luxury Properties, where he quickly became my father's right hand and heir apparent. I graduated from Stern with respectable grades, but a hollowness that followed me into adulthood, a persistent sense that I was living someone else's life. Poorly. 10 years after college, my life looked nothing like the Thompson success story my parents expected. Instead of a corner office at the family company or a prestigious financial firm, I rented a one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn's Bushwick neighborhood, not the gentrified part with artisanal coffee shops, but the section where rent remained almost affordable for a struggling artist. Yes, after 3 soul-crushing years at an investment firm where I excelled at nothing except hiding in bathroom stalls to cry, I'd finally gathered the courage to return to my first love. I'd saved enough to take classes at the Art Students League, built a modest portfolio, and gradually transitioned to full-time artist, much to my parents' horror. A hobbyist, my mother called me during our infrequent phone conversations. When will you grow out of this phase? My studio occupied half my living room, where north-facing windows provided decent light for my mixed-media pieces exploring themes of identity and belonging. I'd managed to place work in a few small galleries and sell commissions occasionally through my website, but financial stability remained elusive. What gave me purpose beyond my personal art was the community program I'd started 8 months earlier, Art Access, offering free classes to underprivileged kids from the neighborhood. Twice weekly, I'd transform my small apartment into a teaching studio, watching children discover their creative voices just as I had at their age. You can't save the world with finger paints, my father had said dismissively when I mentioned the program during our last family dinner 3 months ago. Just last week, I'd faced another professional setback. Pemberton Gallery, a well-respected Chelsea space I'd been courting for months, had finally reviewed my portfolio only to reject it with a form letter. I'd allowed myself to hope this might be my breakthrough, something substantial enough to prove to my parents that my path had merit. Tyler, the graphic designer I'd been casually dating for about 4 months, didn't understand why the rejection hit me so hard. It's just one gallery, he'd said, scrolling through his phone while I fought back tears in his industrial chic Williamsburg apartment. There are plenty of others. Tyler didn't know about the complicated tangle of art, worth, and family approval that defined my emotional landscape. Our relationship existed primarily on weekends, his life of client meetings and happy hours with coworkers intersecting with my solitary studio days and evening art classes for only brief intervals. Still, the company was nice, and he seemed to like my bohemian vibe, as he called it. When the invitation to Jason's engagement party arrived, heavy cream cardstock with gold embossing, I'd almost thrown it away. Jason was marrying Charlotte Astor, daughter of a banking family whose name appeared on buildings throughout Manhattan. The ultimate merger my parents could have wished for. You have to go, Tyler said when I mentioned it. They're your family.
Easy for him to say.
His parents sent him care packages and called weekly just to chat. I stared at the invitation for days before finally texting my RSVP. Some masochistic part of me needed to witness this celebration of my brother's perfect life choices, perhaps as confirmation of everything I wasn't. Finding something to wear became its own unique torture. My wardrobe consisted primarily of paint-splattered jeans and comfortable tops, nothing suitable for an engagement celebration at my parents' estate where the women would be draped in designer labels and family heirlooms. A full day of thrift store hunting yielded a simple black dress that looked reasonably elegant after careful steaming. Just make peace with them, Tyler suggested the night before the party, as though family dynamics were simple puzzles easily solved with goodwill. They're probably not as judgmental as you remember. Before leaving my apartment for the train to Connecticut, I performed my ritual for difficult family encounters, reading Grandma Rose's letters. Over the years, she'd written me regularly, her elegant handwriting filling pages with encouragement, book recommendations, and gentle wisdom. Unlike the hollow platitudes Tyler offered, Rose understood the complex web of emotions that define the Thompson family. "Your path is your own, dear Morgan," she'd written after I told her about quitting the investment firm. "Courage isn't found in living someone else's dream, but in pursuing your own even when the path is difficult." On the Metro North train heading to Greenwich, I watched the city recede, concrete giving way to manicured suburbia. With each mile, I felt myself shrinking, adult Morgan fading as childhood insecurities rose to the surface. By the time the taxi turned through the ornate gates of the Thompson estate, I was 16 again, desperate for approval I knew would never come. The Thompson estate hadn't changed. The circular driveway still featured the marble fountain, a nymph pouring eternally flowing water that my father had imported from Italy. The colonial-style mansion gleamed white against perfectly landscaped grounds where gardeners had planted thousands of white flowers for the occasion. Everything pristine. Everything perfect. Everything screaming wealth and status. Mother greeted me at the door herself, her blonde hair swept into an impeccable chignon, diamonds at her throat catching the late afternoon sunlight. "Morgan, you've arrived." She air-kissed near my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. Her eyes performed their usual rapid assessment of my appearance. "That dress is interesting. We have some time before guests arrive if you'd like to borrow something of mine." "This is fine, Mother," I said, clutching my small handbag tighter. "Congratulations on the engagement. Where's Jason?" "On the terrace with Charlotte and her parents. Do something with your hair before joining them, won't you? The humidity has made it rather voluminous."
Typical.
Not even 5 minutes and already critiqued. I found my way through the house, past the formal living room where we'd never actually lived, through the dining room set for at least 50 guests with the family's Wedgwood china and sterling silver. French doors opened onto the flagstone terrace, where Jason stood with his arm around a willowy blonde in a pale blue designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Morgan." Jason's face lit with what seemed like genuine pleasure. "You made it." We shared an awkward half-hug, the kind that had defined our relationship since childhood. Not quite close, not quite distant. "This is Charlotte," he said, turning to his fiancée. "Charlotte, my sister Morgan." Charlotte Astor was beautiful in that effortless way of the extremely wealthy, perfect teeth, perfect skin, perfect posture that spoke of years of private instruction and deportment. I braced myself for condescension. "I'm so glad to finally meet you." Charlotte surprised me by taking both my hands in hers. "Jason mentioned you're an artist." "I studied art history at Vassar, mostly Renaissance, but I love contemporary work too."
"I'd love to see your pieces sometime."
Her interest seemed genuine, lacking the dismissive tone my parents always used when referencing my little art projects. Before I could respond properly, my father appeared, clapping Jason on the shoulder. "There's my boy. The Harrisons just arrived. Come say hello. Charlotte, your mother is looking for you." He barely glanced my way. "Morgan. Good you're here. Your grandmother's asking for you. She's in the library." As they moved away, I overheard my father say to Jason, "The Harrisons are considering that waterfront development deal. Make sure to mention the profit projections we discussed." I retreated indoors, navigating through early arriving guests, all people from my parents' social and business circles, none of whom seemed to recognize me despite having known me since childhood. In the library, I found no sign of Grandma Rose, just Aunt Patricia questioning a server about whether the champagne was properly chilled. "Morgan? Good heavens, is that you? I almost didn't recognize you." Aunt Patricia squinted at me through her glasses. "Still doing that painting hobby? Your cousin Melissa just made junior partner at her law firm. 31, and already so established." I nodded politely while scanning the room for escape routes. This would be the pattern for the next hour, relatives and family friends asking about my hobby, then pivoting to tell me about their children's conventional successes before I could fully answer. Are you seeing anyone serious?
No?
Well, there's still time, I suppose. Still in that Brooklyn neighborhood? How brave. Have you considered teaching art at a private school? At least there'd be benefits. From across the ballroom, I could hear my mother's voice rising above the growing crowd. Jason conceptualized our entire Hamptons development. 32 homes sold before construction even began. Needing a moment of solitude, I slipped upstairs to my old bedroom. My parents had redecorated it years ago into a neutral guest room, erasing all evidence of my existence. No trace remained of the teenager who had once covered these walls with postcards of famous paintings and her own tentative artistic efforts. On impulse, I opened the closet. Behind a row of bland guest linens, I found a forgotten portfolio, my high school art projects that mother must have stored rather than thrown away. I slid out a self-portrait done in charcoal when I was 17, eyes looking directly at the viewer, questioning, uncertain but determined. You always did see right into the soul of things. I turned to find Grandma Rose in the doorway, elegant in a simple navy dress, her silver hair swept into a soft bun. At 84, she moved more slowly than she once had, but her blue eyes remained sharp and clear. Grandma. I crossed the room to embrace her, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender and Earl Grey tea. She held me at arm's length, studying my face. Let me look at you. Ah, there's my girl. A bit buried under expectation and disappointment, perhaps, but still there. Something about her gaze seemed different, more intense, more urgent than our usual reunions. Stay strong tonight, dear, she said, patting my cheek. Things aren't always what they seem. Before I could ask what she meant, my father's voice boomed over the intercom system installed throughout the house. All guests please proceed to the ballroom for a special announcement. Rose took my arm. Shall we face the lions together? Downstairs, the party was in full swing. At least 100 guests filled the ballroom, orbiting around Jason and Charlotte like planets around twin suns. My parents worked the room with practiced efficiency, my mother's laugh tinkling at strategic intervals, my father's hand clasping shoulders and making connections worth millions. I positioned myself near a potted palm, hoping to remain invisible while fulfilling my familial obligation to be present. From this vantage point, I could observe without participating, a skill perfected over decades of family functions. My father's voice cut through the party chatter as he tapped a sterling silver spoon against his crystal champagne flute. The room gradually quieted, all eyes turning toward the small platform where a string quartet had been playing earlier. Friends, family, distinguished guests, he began, his public speaking voice perfected over years of board meetings and press conferences. Victoria and I are delighted to welcome you to this celebration of not just an engagement, but a joining of two exceptional families. Mother beamed beside him, her smile never reaching her eyes, a detail I'd noticed since childhood but only understood in adulthood. When Jason told us he had met someone special, we were, of course, intrigued. When we learned it was Charlotte Astor, we were thrilled. Appreciative laughter rippled through the crowd. Not because of the Astor name, though who would complain? More laughter. But because we've watched Charlotte grow into the accomplished, gracious woman standing before us today. Charlotte blushed appropriately, while Jason gazed at her adoringly. They did make a striking couple, both tall, athletic, and groomed for success. Jason has exceeded every expectation we've ever had. Father's voice swelled with pride. Valedictorian, Harvard graduate, and now the driving force behind Thompson Properties' most successful year to date. He understands responsibility, legacy, and excellence in a way that makes a father tremendously proud. I took a larger sip of champagne, familiar heat rising to my cheeks. Every family gathering inevitably included some version of the Jason is exceptional speech. I'd learned to dissociate during these moments, mentally sketching compositions or planning projects instead of listening, which is why Victoria and I had decided to announce a special engagement gift tonight. This caught my attention. My parents were generous with Jason in all things, but usually in private. Son, We know you and Charlotte have been looking at properties in Greenwich and Southampton. Father smiled broadly. To help you start your life together properly, your mother and I are giving you a gift of $1.3 million toward your first home as a married couple. Gasps and approving murmurs spread through the crowd. Jason looked genuinely surprised, while Charlotte's parents nodded in satisfaction. With Thompson determination and Astor refinement, we expect nothing but greatness from this union, Father continued. I felt suddenly lightheaded, the champagne souring in my stomach. $1.3 million. More money than I would likely see in a decade, given casually, as though it were a set of towels or kitchen appliances. Then Father's eyes found mine across the room, his expression shifting subtly. Of course, we wish all our children could receive such gifts. The crowd's attention swiveled toward me, standing frozen beside my potted palm sanctuary. If only you weren't such a failure, Morgan, he said, the words wrapped in a smile that made them seem almost like a joke to the crowd. Perhaps someday you'll give us reason for a similar celebration. The room spun slightly. Had he actually said that out loud? In front of everyone? The pitying glances confirmed it wasn't my imagination. My father had just publicly labeled me a failure. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else whispered audibly, "The artist sister, you know." Lives in Brooklyn. I couldn't breathe. The crystal flute trembled in my hand, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the rim. I needed to escape before I shattered. The glass or myself, I wasn't sure which would break first. With as much dignity as I could muster, I placed my glass on a nearby table and walked, not ran, walked, toward the nearest exit. The bathroom down the hall provided blessed privacy, where I finally allowed the tears to come, silent sobs that shook my shoulders as I leaned against the marble vanity. A failure. The word echoed in my mind, confirming every insecurity, every doubt, every negative thought I'd ever had about myself. It wasn't just that Father thought it. I'd known that for years. It was the casual cruelty of saying it publicly, of humiliating me in front of everyone who mattered in their world. This wasn't the first time, of course. There was the Morgan's unique approach to career planning comment at my business school graduation. Though we still love Morgan despite her unconventional choices at Christmas 3 years ago. They artists are dreamers, but someone has to live in reality at last Thanksgiving. But failure, stated so baldly, that was new. I stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror. Red-rimmed eyes, flushed cheeks, hair that had indeed frizzed slightly in the summer humidity. I barely recognized myself. What was I doing here? Why did I keep coming back for more punishment? Why did I still, after all these years, crave approval I would never receive? I could leave now. Walk out the front door, call a taxi, go to the train station, and return to my small but honest life in Brooklyn. I could stop trying to bridge the unbridgeable gap between my parents' expectations and my reality. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Morgan? It's Grandma Rose. May I come in? I opened the door to find my grandmother standing there, concern etched in the fine lines around her eyes. Without a word, she entered and locked the door behind her. Your father, she said, shaking her head, has always been skilled at cruelty disguised as honesty. Fresh tears threatened. He's not wrong, though, is he? By their standards, I am a failure. Rose took my hands in hers, her skin paper-thin but her grip surprisingly strong. Their standards are warped beyond recognition, my dear. Always have been. She guided me to sit on the upholstered bench near the vanity, lowering herself beside me with a small wince I hadn't noticed before. I've never told you much about my relationship with your grandfather and how I came into this family, she said, smoothing her dress. Perhaps it's time. Rose revealed how she'd been considered unsuitable when she married my grandfather, a public school teacher with no social connections marrying into old money. My grandfather had to fight his family to marry her, resulting in years of subtle and not-so-subtle disdain from his parents. When your father was born, I swore I'd raise him with different values, she said. For a while, I thought I had succeeded. Edward was a sensitive, creative child, much like you, actually. But when your grandfather died and Edward inherited everything at just 28, something changed. He became obsessed with proving himself worthy of the Thompson name, of growing the fortune rather than simply maintaining it. I'd never heard any of this before. In all our family mythology, my father had always been portrayed as a natural businessman, born to build the Thompson empire. By the time you came along, Morgan, your father had completely embraced the values I spent years trying to shield him from. Her voice grew heavy with regret. I've watched him do to you exactly what his grandparents did to me. Measure your worth solely by your financial contribution and social standing. She shifted slightly, another wince crossing her features before she masked it. Grandma, are you feeling all right? I asked, noticing now the unusual pallor beneath her careful makeup. She waved away my concern before reaching into her small evening bag to retrieve a linen handkerchief, dabbing delicately at the corner of her eye. Morgan, there's something I need to tell you. Her voice dropped lower. I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors give me 3 to 6 months. The world seemed to stop. Not Grandma Rose. Not my rock, my champion, my only ally.
Why didn't you tell me? Does Dad know?
Is there treatment? We could get other opinions specialists in New York, clinical trials. The words tumbled out in panic. Sure, she soothed, patting my hand. I've made my peace with it. At 84, I've had a full life. Your father knows, yes. In fact, that's partly why I wanted to be here tonight. She explained that her diagnosis had clarified many things for her, including what she wanted to do with her estate. Most people, myself included, assumed Grandma Rose lived modestly because that was her preference. The revelation she shared next stunned me. Your grandfather left everything to me, not to the family trust your father expected. While Edward received the family home and business, I inherited all the investment portfolios and significant property holdings. I've lived simply because that's my nature, but my estate is actually considerably larger than your parents realize. My mind struggled to process this information. 3 weeks ago, after seeing how your parents continued to favor Jason while dismissing your legitimate accomplishments, I consulted my attorney and made significant changes to my will. Rose's eyes held mine steadily. Now, I need you to do something difficult. I need you to go back out there, hold your head high, and stand beside me while I make an announcement of my own. Fear gripped me.
Grandma, no.
You don't need to create drama on my behalf.
This isn't just for you, dear one.
This is for me too. I've spent too many years watching silently from the sidelines. Tonight, that ends. With surprising strength, Rose stood and offered her hand. Shall we? Together, we walked back to the ballroom where the party continued as though no public humiliation had occurred. Jason and Charlotte were circulating among guests while my parents held court near the champagne fountain. Rose straightened her shoulders and walked directly to the small platform, ascending the 2 steps carefully before taking the microphone my father had abandoned earlier. I stood frozen at the bottom of the steps, my heart pounding. If I could have everyone's attention, please. Rose's voice, though softer than my father's, carried a quiet authority that gradually silenced the room. I'd like to say a few words on this special occasion. My father frowned, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Mother's smile tightened dangerously. As the family matriarch, Rose continued, I've had the privilege of watching both my grandchildren grow into adults. While Edward and Victoria have shared their perspective tonight, I'd like to offer mine. The crowd shifted, sensing unexpected drama. Charlotte's parents exchanged glances while Jason looked confused. Success is a curious thing, Rose said, her gaze sweeping the room. Some measured in dollars, some in acquisitions, some in social standing.
She paused.
I've always measured it by a different standard. Authenticity, integrity, and the courage to pursue one's true calling despite pressure to conform. My father took a step forward as if to intervene, but something in Rose's expression stopped him. My grandson Jason has indeed achieved remarkable professional success and found love with the lovely Charlotte. For this, I am genuinely happy. She smiled warmly at them. But tonight, I want to acknowledge my granddaughter Morgan's success as well. success that looks quite different, but is no less significant. All eyes turned to me, still standing at the base of the platform. While Morgan's path hasn't followed the Thompson template, she has built something truly remarkable. Not only has she developed genuine artistic talent recognized by several New York galleries, but she's created a community program bringing art education to underprivileged children who would otherwise never experience the transformative power of creative expression. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I felt myself blushing, both embarrassed and deeply moved by my grandmother's public acknowledgement. This is why, Rose continued, her voice growing stronger, I am announcing tonight that I have revised my estate plans. My father stepped forward again, alarm replacing annoyance. Mother, this isn't the appropriate time or place. On the contrary, Edward. You chose this moment to make a financial announcement regarding one grandchild. I'm simply doing the same for both. The room went completely silent. While Jason and Charlotte will receive a generous gift to complement what Edward and Victoria have provided, the majority of my estate will establish the Rose Thompson Foundation for Arts Access, with Morgan as its director. Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. My mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. The foundation will secure studio space, provide scholarships, and expand Morgan's existing program to reach children throughout New York City. The initial endowment will be approximately $15 million. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. $15 million. More than 10 times what my parents had just given Jason. Because true success, Rose concluded, looking directly at my father, isn't measured by conformity to others' expectations, but by the lives we touch and the authentic legacy we leave behind. She replaced the microphone and descended the steps carefully, taking my arm as though nothing extraordinary had just occurred. Chaos erupted as soon as Grandma Rose and I moved away from the platform. Guests buzzed with excitement over the unexpected drama, while my parents quickly huddled with Jason, their faces masks of controlled fury. Charlotte's parents appeared confused, unsure whether this development elevated or diminished their daughter's advantageous match. "Grandma, I can't believe you did that," I whispered as we made our way through the crowd, receiving curious glances from all sides. "Believe it, dear," she replied calmly. "I've rehearsed that speech for weeks." Before we could reach a quiet corner, Charlotte broke away from the family huddle and approached us, her expression surprisingly warm. "Miss Thompson, that was an incredible announcement," she said to my grandmother before turning to me. "Morgan, I had no idea about your community art program. It sounds amazing." Her sincerity caught me off guard. "Thank you. It's small, but the kids are incredible. So much raw talent. I'd love to hear more about it sometime. Perhaps I could visit?" My undergraduate thesis was actually on art education as social intervention. Before I could respond, my mother materialized beside Charlotte, placing a proprietary hand on her arm. "Darling, your parents are looking for you." Some confusion about the seating arrangements for the dinner. Charlotte hesitated, then smiled apologetically. "We'll talk later, Morgan." As she walked away, Mother's gaze swept over Grandma Rose and me with glacial coldness. "Mother Thompson, I believe several guests wish to congratulate you on your announcement. Morgan, your father would like a word. In his study.
Now."
The familiar command voice triggered my childhood reflex to obey immediately, but Rose's hand tightened on my arm. "Actually, Victoria," my grandmother said pleasantly, "Morgan will be accompanying me for a breath of fresh air. Edward's concerns can wait until tomorrow." Mother's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose fractionally, the Thompson equivalent of open-mouthed shock. No one contradicted her directives, especially regarding my father's wishes. "I insist," she said, her voice dropping dangerously. "As do I," Rose replied, her smile never wavering. "Come, Morgan." As we turned away, I caught sight of Jason watching the exchange, his expression unreadable. For a moment, our eyes met across the room, and I thought I detected something surprising, not anger or resentment, but something almost like relief. We had almost reached the terrace doors when he intercepted us. Grandma, can I speak with Morgan for a moment? He asked, his voice low and urgent. Rose studied him carefully before nodding. I'll wait just outside, Morgan. When she'd moved away, Jason ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a nervous gesture I'd rarely seen from my perpetually composed brother. I want you to know I had nothing to do with Dad's announcement or what he said about you, he began, the words tumbling out quickly. It was completely inappropriate, and I'm sorry. His apology, perhaps the first I could remember receiving from him, left me momentarily speechless. Thank you. I finally managed. But it's not your responsibility.
Still.
He glanced over his shoulder where our parents were now engaged in damage control with Charlotte's family. What Grandma did was impressive. A small laugh escaped me. That's one word for it. Morgan, he hesitated, lowering his voice further. I'm not sure I can do this much longer. Do what? This. He gestured vaguely around us. The perfect Thompson-son role. The family business. All of it. The confession shocked me more than anything else that had happened that evening. Jason had always seemed to thrive in the world I'd fled. What are you talking about? You're brilliant at it. Dad's golden child. The heir apparent. I'm miserable, he said simply. Have been for years. I wanted to study environmental science, remember? Not real estate development. I did remember, vaguely, a brief phase in his junior year of high school when he talked about marine biology and conservation. It had disappeared so quickly I'd assumed it was just a passing interest. Dad made it very clear that wasn't an option for a Thompson, Jason continued. So, I did what was expected. Always. But seeing you tonight, hearing what Grandma said about authentic legacy, it hit home. Before I could respond, Father's commanding voice cut through the murmur of the party. Jason, the Westfields are asking about the Harbor Point project. Jason's face immediately rearranged itself into the confident expression I recognized from Thompson Properties brochures. We'll talk more later, he promised before rejoining the party. Outside on the terrace, I found Grandma Rose seated on a wrought iron bench, gazing at the manicured gardens now lit by tasteful landscape lighting. Everything all right with Jason? She asked as I joined her. I'm not sure, I answered honestly. He said some surprising things.
Good.
Perhaps there's hope for him yet. She patted my hand. Now, shall we face the Inquisition together? Or would you prefer to escape? The study door was already open when we arrived, my parents clearly expecting us. Father stood behind his massive mahogany desk while Mother perched on an antique settee, both maintaining the appearance of calm though tension radiated from them like heat. Mother, Father began without preamble, what you did tonight was completely inappropriate and undermining. Was it? Rose asked mildly. I found it quite appropriate given your own announcement and subsequent commentary. This is not about Morgan's feelings, he snapped, shooting me a dismissive glance. This is about family business being conducted privately, not as entertainment for guests. Precisely my thought when you publicly called your daughter a failure, Rose replied, her voice hardening slightly. I was merely stating facts. Morgan has repeatedly rejected opportunities to contribute meaningfully to this family's legacy. I stood silently, the familiar pattern playing out, discussions about me happening as though I weren't present. Edward, Rose said, your definition of meaningful contribution has always been distressingly narrow. $15 million, Mother interjected, her voice tight. That's family money that should remain in the family, not be squandered on some charity art project. Something in me finally snapped. It's not some charity art project, I said, my voice stronger than I expected. It's a legitimate educational program that's already changing lives. And it's not your money. It's Grandma's to do with as she wishes. My father looked at me, as though suddenly realizing I was in the room. Morgan, you've never understood how family wealth works. This misguided gesture of my mother's is final, Rose interrupted. The paperwork is signed. The foundation is already established. Unless you plan to challenge a perfectly legal will and trust created by a sound-minded woman, which would generate exactly the kind of public scandal you've spent your life avoiding, I suggest you accept this gracefully." Father's face flushed with anger. "We'll discuss this further tomorrow, when everyone is thinking more rationally." "There's nothing further to discuss," I said, surprising myself again. "Grandma has made her decision, and I'm honored to help carry out her vision." Mother stood abruptly. "We have guests waiting. This conversation isn't over." "Actually, Victoria, it is," Rose said calmly. "Morgan and I will be leaving now. Please make our excuses to the remaining guests." And somehow, despite my parents' protests and attempts to assert control, that's exactly what we did. I helped my grandmother to my rental car, and we drove away from the Thompson estate, leaving behind the party celebrating one vision of success to embrace a completely different one. 3 months after the fateful engagement party, I stood in the center of a sunlit loft space in Manhattan's Chelsea district, watching as contractors installed track lighting for what would soon be the main gallery of the Rose Thompson Foundation for Arts Access. The foundation's first major acquisition had been this building, a former textile factory with soaring ceilings, massive windows, and enough space for multiple studios, classrooms, and exhibition areas. The initial funding from Grandma Rose's estate had been released immediately, allowing us to move quickly, while she could still participate in bringing the vision to life. The loft would serve as both headquarters for the foundation and an expanded home for my Art Access program, which had already tripled its enrollment with the help of 2 additional teaching artists I'd been able to hire. "What do you think about displaying the children's work in this alcove?" Rose asked from her wheelchair, gesturing toward a recessed area near the entrance. "Visitors should see their creativity first thing when they arrive." Her health had declined rapidly after the engagement party, the cancer progressing faster than her doctors had initially predicted. Yet she remained intimately involved in every decision, her mind as sharp as ever even as her body weakened. "That's perfect," I agreed, already envisioning the rotating exhibitions we could create. "Maybe we could install adjustable hanging systems so the kids can help curate their own shows." The elevator doors opened, revealing Jason and Charlotte, who had become regular visitors to the foundation space, much to my ongoing surprise. "The sign installation team is downstairs," Jason announced. "They need access to the roof for the mounting brackets." After that night at the engagement party, my brother had begun a careful, tentative reconnection with me. At first, I'd been suspicious of his motives, but over subsequent weeks, I'd witnessed what seemed to be a genuine awakening in him. He remained at Thompson Properties, too entrenched to simply walk away, but had begun quietly redirecting some of the company's development efforts towards sustainable building practices and affordable housing components. Charlotte proved an unexpected ally in this evolution. Her interest in my work had been genuine, and she'd quickly volunteered to serve on the foundation's board, bringing both her art history background and her extensive social connections to help establish our legitimacy in philanthropic circles. "Morgan, I had an idea about the community outreach program," Charlotte said, unfolding architectural plans on a nearby table. "What if we designated one of the smaller studios for senior artists? We could create an intergenerational mentorship component." As they discussed logistics, I watched Grandma Rose observing this unlikely collaboration with satisfaction. She caught my eye and winked. My parents' reaction to these developments had unfolded exactly as one might expect. After several failed attempts to challenge the trust arrangements, they retreated into cold formality, maintaining minimal contact while carefully managing public perception of the family rift. The one surprise had come approximately 6 weeks after the engagement party, when my father had appeared unannounced at my Brooklyn apartment, alone and uncharacteristically subdued. "Your grandmother always was stubborn," he'd said, standing awkwardly in my paint-splattered living room. "Like you." It wasn't an apology for years of dismissal or his public humiliation of me, but it was perhaps as close as Edward Thompson would ever come to one. He left after less than 15 minutes, declining my offer of tea, but had subsequently sent a brief email acknowledging the Foundation's first official press release. "Baby steps in Thompson terms. Earth to Morgan." Jason's voice pulled me back to the present. "The contractor needs a decision on the classroom partition walls. Sliding or fixed?" "Sliding," Rose and I answered simultaneously, then smiled at each other. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity as we prepared for both the Foundation's official launch and our first major exhibition featuring emerging artists from underrepresented communities. Grandma Rose's condition deteriorated further, requiring a hospital bed to be installed in her home and round-the-clock nursing care, but she remained determined to attend the opening. "I may not be here for all that will come," she told me during a quiet moment when I visited her with portfolio selections for the show, "but I need to witness the beginning." The night before the opening, Rose took a significant turn for the worse. The doctors advised against moving her, but she was adamant. "I've made arrangements," she said when I arrived at her home, her voice weak but her eyes clear. "I will be at that opening, Morgan. Some things are worth the pain." And so she was, arriving in a private ambulance, attended by nurses, regally holding court from her wheelchair in the center of the main gallery as New York's art community, press, and even a few curious Thompson business associates gathered for the Foundation's debut. My parents made a brief appearance, a calculated social obligation rather than genuine support, but their presence still marked a public acknowledgement of my work that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. "Your grandmother looks tired," Mother said as she prepared to leave after exactly the minimum acceptable time. "You should consider her comfort above these festivities." Grandma Rose made her choice, I replied evenly. She understands what matters. As the evening wound down, I found myself alone with my grandmother near the exhibition of children's artwork, paintings, sculptures, and mixed media pieces created by the kids from my original Brooklyn program. "Do you know what I see when I look at these?" Rose asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What?" "Possibility. Unfiltered by expectation or convention." She reached for my hand. "That's what I saw in you from the beginning, Morgan. Possibility." 1 week later, Rose passed away peacefully in her sleep, having lived just long enough to see the Foundation's successful launch covered in the New York Times art section. At her request, the funeral was simple and intimate, a sharp contrast to typical Thompson commemorations. My father spoke briefly, his eulogy formal and respectful, but emotionally restrained. Then, to everyone's surprise, Jason stepped forward to share memories of Rose, encouraging him to collect tide pool specimens during childhood summers, an early passion for marine biology she had quietly nurtured even as our parents redirected his interests toward business. "She saw us," he concluded, his voice breaking slightly. "All of us. As we were, not as someone wanted us to be." In the year since Rose's passing, the Foundation has flourished beyond my wildest expectations. We've provided scholarships to 15 promising young artists from low-income backgrounds, established partnerships with public schools throughout the city, and mounted for successful exhibitions featuring emerging artists who might otherwise have remained undiscovered. Jason and Charlotte postponed their wedding, using the time to reconsider what they truly wanted rather than fulfilling family expectations. When they finally married 6 months ago, it was in a simple ceremony on the beach rather than the society extravaganza originally planned. My parents remain my parents, complex, difficult, unlikely to ever fully understand or approve of my choices. But something has shifted, if only slightly. Last month, my mother actually visited the Foundation, ostensibly to discuss a potential Thompson Properties donation for tax purposes, but she lingered in the gallery, studying the artwork with what appeared to be genuine interest. "Your grandmother would be pleased," she said before leaving, "the closest thing to approval I may ever receive. As for me, I've found peace in creating a different kind of success than the one my parents envisioned. My own artwork has improved tremendously now that I can create without the constant pressure of financial survival. I've even been offered a solo show at Pemberton Gallery, the same space that rejected me before. Today, I'm putting the finishing touches on a portrait of Grandma Rose that will hang permanently in the Foundation's main hall. In it, she sits in her garden, surrounded by the roses she loved, her eyes looking directly at the viewer. Wise, challenging, loving all at once. Sometimes the greatest gifts arrive disguised as painful moments. Sometimes our deepest wounds lead us to our truest healing. And sometimes it takes a public humiliation at an engagement party to set us free from expectations that never fit in the first place. What about you? Has someone in your life ever seen the real you when others couldn't? Has a painful moment ever led to unexpected growth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and healing. Remember, success isn't measured by others' expectations, but by the courage to live authentically. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and until next time, may you find the strength to define success on your own terms.